In this video, we're going to talk about focus, more specifically the eyes and as well as the mental focus as a part of the meditative breathwork, cultivation, synthesis, integration, and process. So we're going to talk about four different types of eye focus, not necessarily eye, but using this, putting our attention to the eye and intention to the eye will help get to those. So we're going to talk about narrow versus wide focus and a soft, loose gaze focus versus a hard, tight focus. What do I mean? So first, let's talk about the difference between wide and a tighter focus. If I'm using this pen as an example, if I'm looking at this pen and I'm looking at this one letter on this pen, and I'm looking at a specific point on that letter on the pen, that is a tight, specific, directed focus. This is when you want to be more focused on the specific thing you're looking at versus you lose some of the attention to what's going around and what's around it. So this would be a specific, tight, narrow focus, which for meditation and related practices usually isn't what we're going for unless you're doing something very specific. But for those starting out with breath work and such, it is important to not do this super duper directed focus, whether you have your eyes open or closed. So I'll demonstrate it after I talk about the others. So then we have the wide but still really direct and specific focus. So we grab two pens. I'm going to be looking at both pens at the same time. So in my field of vision, I'm sort of cheating because I can see myself on the screen here. But if I ignore the screen and just looked at my pens, and I say I'm just looking just at the tip of the pens, and I'm concentrating very focusedly, high focus, direct focus, tight focus, on these 2 points, which is the extent of my vision. Actually, I can go a little bit more, but I'm still directed at them, even though it's wide. So if you look at my eyes and my face and generally just my body language, this is the first one where I'm looking really directed, narrow focus. And this is a wide but still pinpoint focus in terms of I'm really focusing on specific points. Okay, now, versus what we're going to call a loose or soft gaze. First, a soft gaze that's at a thinner, narrow point. Now we're going to look at this H letter on this pen. But instead of looking at a specific point on this letter, I'm going to, maybe this is not the best way to put it, make my eyes lazy in a way. So I know the H is in the center of my attention and focus, but I can't quite make out the distinct characteristics of the letter. Is it sharp? Is it rounded? It's a soft focus of a point. Versus this is, using the two pens again, going to the widest I can without the pens leaving my field of vision. I'm going to be looking at both pens in this wide panoramic focus, but at the same time, I'm going to soften my gaze, soften my focus, so that I'm no longer looking for the distinct qualities and characteristics of the pens I'm looking at. Now, I recommend using a pen at first, two pens at first, to get the idea of this, but the idea is to do it without the pens. So I will show you now the four focuses, one by one, with then without the pens. This is the directed, high, tight, narrow, distinct focus. This is the softer version of that. This is the hard focus on the pens, but with a wide perspective. And then the same thing, but with a soft focus. So another way to think about it, if this is hard to follow or do, I recommend doing this as and I'll describe it again, and let's do all of them, and you can follow along. So have a pen or a finger. Pen may be a little bit better, especially if there's a letter on it. Look and focus on one letter, just this one part of the letter really intently, and then still look at that letter, but soften so that maybe it gets a little blurry, but it's just not in super duper focus. Next, grab two pens or two fingers, put them aside until you can just see the extent of your field of vision. Now look at the point of your fingers. There you go, like this maybe. Really intently, but wide. Then try doing the same thing, but loosening the gaze, the focus, so that it gets a little blurry and you can't make out the distinct characteristics. And this fourth one, this wide, loose, soft gaze and focus, is the one I recommend to do for most of the guided meditative breath work videos I have, unless I specifically say otherwise. Once you get used to this, you will be aware of how you're switching, and there are times where you want to do one of these gazes at the other. Meaning if you're, say you're driving, you will be having a more specific, powered focus, alternating between narrow and wider. But when you're relaxing and more toning back, getting more parasympathetic, the soft gaze is what helps. It also helps look inwards in a way. So you also think about the harder gaze as looking outwards, whereas soft gaze helps integrate the outward and inward looking, also with the inward looking. So next time you do any breathing, deep breathing, or just focusing on your breathing, I recommend doing it with the especially if you're doing it for the relaxation purpose. Do it with a wide and soft gaze, and you will, if you pay attention, you'll notice that loosens a lot, drops a lot of the tension, the head, back of the neck, all the way down to your shoulders. So this is also something good you can do if you feel like you're getting too focused and in your mindset, your eyes, or your muscles. Just let your eyes relax, widen, and soften. Take a breath. And this will really get you into this soft, soft mode. And when you need it, it will help.